I'm not designed for a corporate job, by the way, right? I figured out that early on. All my jobs, either in full-time or part-time, has been startups. I wouldn't be surprised if we produce billion-dollar revenue generating companies equally, not just in terms of valuations, but in terms of impact, because the digital footprint is so high, so large, right? What we were always wondering that India doesn't have a market to sell is a market to sell now. So if you now see every sector that has been opening, manufacturing, so agriculture or services or the semiconductor and everything else is coming out, the amount of new ideas that can come back, we never had that opportunity at all. So I would say by 2025, I won't be surprised if we have multi-billion-dollar revenue-making companies coming from the India as such. India leading in a lot of new tech infrastructure innovations and truly, not in the Web3 world, but truly decentralizing the power that should be there in the Indian economy. Today, a vegetable producer or a seller sitting in any part of the India has the first-hand information that they never had in the last any time, right? Now that is the first level of things. Can you integrate them? Can you then build the physical infrastructure such as roads and fastest connectivity and move goods faster? Then we are talking.
So just as I came out of the meeting with you, I called my old friends in college called Ronak Dhoot that Bhai Cofounder banega because he knew tech better than me. They look for people they know with complementary skills. So I called another friend Arpit Tripathi कि भाई तू co-founder बनेगा. Today's podcast, I would like to start with a story. I landed up in Bangalore in 2014. I joined for a conference called PyCon, my startup. To give a background, I came full-time into my startup in 2012 and then I was looking for co-founders. And then in 2014, I happened to come to Bangalore for a conference called PyCon and I was completely mesmerized by the city. And in 2014, after spending 3 days for PyCon, I returned home. I told my parents, let me go to Bangalore again for a month and, see what I can do in the tech city. Because I was a first-time founder with zero connections, as you can imagine, as raw it is to be. I reached out to like 5 to 10 people. Only Santosh Panda responded to me. And this was back when LinkedIn was also very new. So I wrote to Santosh that, hey, I'm building a platform called Atodoc. It's a SaaS solution for doctors. I have built the mockups. And now, I want to take guidance on how to make it a product, make it a business. So Santosh called me at his office in Kormangla back then. He was building Explara. And I came to the office and at that time some emergency happened and Santosh had to say, let's meet another time. So I went back disappointed. See, this is how Bangalore is. But Santosh immediately called me back, that let's meet day after tomorrow at Cafe Coffee Day in HSR so I can give you 1 to 1.5 hours. I came to Cafe Coffee Day, thinking that nothing could change my life, right? This conversation. But moving into a conversation, I showed Santosh the mockups which I had built for my product. And there was no tech behind it. It was just plain mockups built on Photoshop. And Santosh asked me, are you building it alone? I said, yes. And then his second question was, can you find co-founders? I said, I don't know. And then he said one thing that changed my entire life. That if you can't find co-founders, you might shut down the startup that you are building. And it shook me to the core that what Santosh was telling me was truth. That if I'm not able to convince 1 or 2 people to join me as co-founders in the journey, how will I be able to convince customers, investors, or anybody else? And that's how my and Santosh story starts.
Fantastic, Sid. So happy to see you today. And, I always remember that vividly, that where we sat down. I don't know why. Not every meetings we can remember, but I think that meeting that we met, in the HSR Cafe Coffee Day, I saw a very young, passionate, founder coming in. And because when I started Explara, I had similar difficulties, right? So the reason I asked that question is because I could see someone standing in front of me, almost like me coming back if I would have started at that point of time. So I didn't want you to go through a years of pain, right? And just chasing a passion alone, right? So I think I remember that vividly, and always whenever I remember about you or whenever I read about it, it always flashes back that memory time and again, saying, you know what, having seen somebody that day and how you have been progressing and kind of discovering yourself. Right? I think that's commendable. It's not about just that piece of advice, but I think what you did after that with your passion is commendable, Sid.
No, thank you, Santosh. If you hadn't given that hard-hitting advice, so what happens is most people, don't give time to unknown founders or first-time founders. You were exceptional in that. And that time there was no startup ecosystem in 2014. So that time I think you had just raised funding over raising funding. So it was even a challenging time for you yourself. So giving out time when you had already a team to take care of to an unknown founder. And second is most people are very nice. They don't want to hurt anybody in the first meeting.
Yeah, true.
That, in India, we have a culture of being nice.
Absolutely. I think even today, right, even very recently, we all have been part of the ecosystem. I think that's a fact, right? The fact is that, I think one of the biggest sort of, thing that as a founder, we should be advising or at least giving a guidance to another person who is trying to find their space is to help them in the right direction and not being nice, right? We can always be nice by saying, yeah, you can reach from here to Delhi, you can reach. But how, when, so thank you for the appreciation. I have really loved the, being that honesty and not being nice just for the sake of it.
If you think being right to somebody for a long term, like in Buddhism, it's called being compassionate. So I wish, and being compassionate is, I wish happiness for you, right? And that was a true compassion that you showed to me, that you wished happiness for me and you wanted to save me from the pain that you yourself went through. And compassion is not necessarily being nice. It's being, to do what's right for the other person. And it's not about also giving advice which brings pleasure, right? So which saves from pain.
Yes.
Right. Sometimes the pain is a necessary thing which the other person needs. Is the medicine that the...
True. And we all know, Sid, now that you've been, in the industry, choosing a lot of founders to back them and all. And this doesn't come natural to all. But I think fundamentally, as an entrepreneur, I think we are gifted to a large extent just to ensure that people discover their path, but you give them a bit of guidance and being frank and transparent about it. I think, people will figure it out. There are so many opportunities across the world, they'll figure it out. The only wrong thing that will happen is being a nice and kind of like, then they're realizing that, hey, you know what, this was not even required, this conversation. So important for all of us to being frank and to the core of the point, and literally also understanding what the person is all about, right? You had such a good sort of clarity, your mock-up, everything was right there, right? And I was very, very happy that somebody coming to this meeting with such a clarity and dedication, right? You hardly see. And again, today situations are very different in India because a lot more success is there, so people are a lot more prepared. But back in 2012 to 2014, a lot of early founders didn't know, right? Didn't have a clarity. So I was very happy when you came in with a mock-up, with a clarity. So I felt, hey, you know what, this guy is going to fly. But I think he shouldn't miss on that point, right? He shouldn't just get carried away by what he has done or what he's capable and just not go blind into that world. And if he has, as a strong co-founder, he will be able to thrive. So that was my sort of quick understanding by meeting you and sort of giving that guidance there.
I can tell, right, what happened immediately after I met you. So just as I came out of the meeting with you, I called my old friends in college called Ronak Dhoot, that Bhai, co-founder banega. Because he knew tech better than me. And at that point in time, he was doing a job and running his own startup. So I think he politely said no. Then I called another friend of mine from college because I had my own network in college, right? That's what most entrepreneurs who just come out of college, don't have a large professional experience do. They look for people they know with complementary skills. So I called another friend, Arpit Tripathi, ki bhai, tu co-founder banega. So that happened. And he said, yaar, I have large family responsibility, so I'll not be able to take that plunge.
Hi everyone. Before we begin, I would like to share that this podcast is brought to you by Prime Venture Partners, an early stage VC fund led by Amir Somani, Shripati Acharya, and Sanjay Swami. Prime is often the first institutional investor in category defining tech startups in fintech, SaaS, healthcare, and education, such as MyGate, Quizzes, Planet Spark, Bolt, and Clip. To know more about Prime, visit primevp.in.
And I remember from a conversation with you, you said get somebody full time, not part time in your venture, as you are also full time.
Yeah. A lot of founders do that mistake, right? By saying, oh, I'm good at it just for the namesake, or just in a very, sort of small outcome thinking to say, why do I need a full time? I have to give away a lot of my stake, right? So they get into that loop of not thinking bigger outcomes and bigger responsibilities by just finding out a stopgap solution. And that happens even now, even all the time. It could have happened to you too, right? This is pre-Farm Easy era, right?
Yes.
Right? The entire health tech boom was about to come, and the market was wide open. You knew what you wanted to do. And at that time, if you would have just gone somebody saying, oh yeah, you come in and just we'll figure out, I don't think it would have a good impact. So we shouldn't be having a part-time sort of thing. Even if it evolves, right? A lot of times, a lot of good founders don't get co-founders immediately. But I think all of us should aim that saying, at some point of time, if this is going to grow really well, you taking full responsibility. There is no part-time, there is no sort of ad hoc kind of solutions. That doesn't work. We've seen it, right? None of the startups would ever scale with that mindset.
It became then the mission of my life to, find co-founders who are better than me. So what I did is, right, I started going to more conferences. One of the more technical conferences called BLR Droid, which is for Android developers. I pitched the mockups which I had. Another thing that you changed my mind at that meeting was, right, and that I truly appreciate is, I had prepared web-based mockups. And you told me, right, ki the era of web is gone, build for mobile, right? So immediately after that meeting, I started building mobile-based mockups. And then at BLR Droid meeting, that's how I ended up at BLR Droid, because I knew that I want to build for mobile. So at BLR Droid, I built mobile-based mockups and I presented there. So there was one other gentleman called Satyadeep Karnati who was also presenting his solution. He was working in Oracle. And we two instantly hit off, right? While others were talking, we were just discussing about what we could do. And it came to a point that we started meeting for coffee over a period of time. And that, I said, Satyadeep, I proposed him that, will you be my co-founder? And he asked for a few days. And then after a few days, because he had another opportunity, there was a startup called BookPad, which was later acquired by Yahoo.
I remember that.
So he was offered of being the first engineer there, not a co-founder. There were already 3 co-founders from IIT Guwahati, his alma mater. They were his batchmates and seniors. So he discussed with his best friend, Saurabh NRS. And Saurabh also told him, like, they both used to hack together in college. And then after also college, Saurabh worked in Microsoft, Satyadeep worked in Oracle, and they used to develop projects at night, various Android apps. So he discussed with Saurabh that, what should I do? So Saurabh said, become a co-founder, right? You could become first engineer at many places because you are good at engineering. And then after some time, I discussed with Satyadeep that would Saurabh be interested to come as a co-founder also, because it will make the team really strong,
much better, much stronger.
Just the 3 of us. And I pitched to Saurabh, and Saurabh also, joined. And after, I think, 6 to 7 months, both came full time.
So you didn't just hear, right? That's also makes you different, right? Because it's one thing, as they say, right? Especially in the business building, what insights we get and how much we apply, right? I think there's a huge difference, right? There's a difference of -10 to +10. So I think, I'm so happy to hear. I didn't know that BLR Droid sort of story. So happy that, you just didn't assume that just let me find out a co-founder and get going, but you went beyond, and even getting Saurabh convinced, and you not worried about, hey, am I going to be losing out another 33% of the stake that I'm building, right? Which is nothing on the day 1 or even day 10, right? So I think, again, a good kind of signal, that you were prepared to learn and you were experimenting with your ideas and very open to the new world. Keep that pace, as you now make a lot of bets in terms of people who just don't take what we tell them, right? Because that's obvious, right? You tell them to do that, yeah, there is a clarity there. But what do you do beyond that? I think the best entrepreneurs are always like that, right? You bring them for something and you give them some directions, but they are going to explode after that, right? Because that's how they are different. So it's also important for a lot of us to not just go in that smaller outcome of something that I heard or just an insight that I was, came across, but go beyond that. And very important in the founder stage, where a lot of good ideas don't come out on just that point. And because you limited yourself, right? And on the other day, I was talking to somebody who was saying, yeah, I can get it done. I said, why should you be getting it done, right? You wanted to do that? Find a co-founder. What you are good at, please do that. Please amplify that to 10x. Find somebody else where you think I need to have that clarity. For example, I was talking to a founder who said, I needed somebody in the UX. So I want to learn UX. I said, okay, good. Learn UX from your customer's insight point of view, but not to build an expertise saying, oh, I will become an UX expert and then I will also become a communication expert and then I'm going to build a product. Nothing is waiting. So good to hear that you kind of like went in that sort of an exploration mode to find co-founders, and go ahead.
Thanks, Santosh. Santosh, what I want to learn from you is, right, you have been one of the few OGs of the startup ecosystem in India today, right? And I think you built Explara over 10 to 12 years. It was one of the first SaaS companies along with WebEngage,
Yes.
right, that got started in 2010 to 2012 era. What made you stick to startup ecosystem? And now you are back again in a full-time giving mode with Foundership, where you are helping incubate Web3 companies.
I think the credit goes to Bangalore, and I think Bangalore also, some way, I would say positively corrupted my mind, right? Positively influenced my mind rather than corrupted. I think way back when I started my career here in Bangalore and I got an opportunity to work with a lot of new age startups way back in 2003, 4, 5, right? Those times, or even early. I felt while I was part of a lot of engineering team, I felt that there is some inclination to, sort of starting up. So starting up was always in my mind. I think that was evident. So back in London, when I was to live between 2003 to 11, I started up there too, right? Again, I realized that the co-founder and I, we couldn't agree that this thing is going to take time, and that didn't go through. We are still friends. But then when I started Explara early on, yes, it had a lot of difficulties because way back in those days, 9, 10, 11, nobody even knew what angel investment is, right? The angel list doesn't exist at that point of time. In fact, Naval's book called Angel was only in a PDF form, right? People were buying for $10. If you look at that timings, I felt that, hey, look, this is something that I've initiated. I also drew a lot of, inspiration from people who have been doing before that. Right? A lot of good folks who tried at that point of time. And I was following even AdventNet, which was Zoho's earlier company name, right? Way back in 2005 before they rebranded. So it was very clear that technology companies are going to take off, right? The market segment is small. And India also had a challenge because our local investors were not ready to see whether we can succeed in the global. Like while we can do in manufacturing and all that, but tech companies, product companies. If you say IT services company, people say, yeah, possibly doable. But product companies, we have not built anything, now that we talk about, right? So I think that sort of drove me to say, let's build, right? And it's always easy to sort of give up and say, I will go for the next challenge. I always take a pointer to say, is the market growing, right? Have you got a space in the market? Do you understand this market well? Does customer like what you're doing? Those 3-4 parameters is what I use. Everything else surrounding it is not in your control, such as market boom, market goes down, you get fund, you don't get fund. All those are not in your scope of things because that is based upon many other market conditions that you cannot control. So an aim to see that I can take a product to global and an aspiration that yes, what I do is what I like to do. Right, I can't do anything beyond that, right? Could be a limitation, could be also. I'm not designed for a corporate job, by the way, right? So I figured out that early on. All my jobs, either in full-time or part-time, has been startups. Way back, right? First company was Sonara Software, which in fact grew from maybe 200 companies to 800 companies when I was there in that time. Beyond that, it has been always startup.
Dear listeners, before we dive further into the podcast, I would like to welcome Prashant Ganti, Head of Product Management at Zoho Payroll and Zoho Books. Prashant, Zoho products are an interconnected ecosystem that solves problems across all functions of a business. How is Zoho Payroll solving problems beyond payroll?
Thanks, Siddharth. That's a very good question and comes to the heart of Zoho. So we, from the very beginning, had decided we are not going to be a single product company. So, and we also believe that the systems have to be deeply integrated. Data should not be imprisoned within one system. Data has to flow across multiple systems. And payroll, right, by its very virtue, straddles both HR and finance, two extremely critical departments that are important for the functioning of the organization, right? So we provide bi-directional data synchronization between our HR suite of products as well as the finance suite. From the upstream, when employee joins, right, his details automatically flow to the payroll system. And when the payroll processing is done, right, it automatically flows to the accounting system. So it helps with end-to-end automation. It helps the HR department, it helps the finance department. And furthermore, this going forward will flow into the analytics also. So there's complete end-to-end bi-directional data synchronization, and this helps with everything. So basically, business spend less time in any of the administrative tasks and can do more value at work.
Thank you, Prashant. Dear listeners, you will find more about Zoho Payroll in the show notes. Now, let's further continue with the podcast.
To come back to your questions, I think a lot of those factors that is inbuilt drove me to be with Explara, continue to get appreciations and be around, right? One. Now coming back with Foundership is also same thing. When I took a break from Explara to say, let the team drive, let Ashok and team drive. So 2020 was more of an experiment year, right? What do I do? And then when I opened my calendar saying, hey, if you are in the second tier, third tier city, and just created a simple concept called grittiest. If you are in second tier, third tier city, most of the times we don't get attention, right? What Bangalore's and Delhi's and Mumbai's of the world could get. I got around 176 people coming and taking all the calendar. And people came from Asansol to Sambalpur in Odisha to, I don't know where not. So that got me to really feel that, hey, you know what? Yes, I have been hearing that I've been in the ecosystem for long, but I could now see a data which says I'm still relevant. And I think this ecosystem still needs a space to operate. I think that was the backbone of why Foundership came in. Web3 came a little later, but sort of, the outlook to be with founders and continue to believe that amazing companies are going to be built. And this is a lifetime opportunity. Right? For people who are already in the ecosystem, I think they should never leave the ecosystem. That's my first and fundamental sort of thing, right? If you have been in the startup ecosystem, you don't leave the startup ecosystem now, right? Watch out, even in fact, now, yeah. Right? If you have left it, please come back, right? If you don't, you have to leave because we are going to go to $11-12 trillion, sort of economy and and dominating global. So I think all those factors have been sort of part and parcel, not just passion, but a very calculated understanding about what this is going to become.
Let's go back, right? When you started in 2010, 2012 kind of a time frame, unicorn was hardly a word that you hear about, right? It was, how do you start up? And if you get some customers, how do you are able to raise some angel round of funding?
Yeah,
that's it.
That's all.
And if you are extremely lucky, like 1 out of 10,000 or 20,000 startups, a VC might invest in you for a Series A.
Yeah.
That was the maximum possible, achievable for a startup.
True.
Right. And now in these last 10 years, from 2012 to 2022, India has seen more than 100 unicorns.
Yes.
A wealth creation for few,
yes,
I would say. But startups, the dream has yet to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
For a nation like US is a pure startup nation. Whatever happens to it, right? The Intels of the world, Apples of the world, yeah. Facebooks of the world,
yeah.
Amazon of the world got created there and created trillions of dollars of wealth for those, right? VCs got created there because these companies created such kind of wealth and capitalism that could come back into the ecosystem.
True.
And India, everybody is bullish about.
Yeah.
But we have truly to see that kind of potential getting unlocked, and as we are sitting in recession in October 2022, why do you say that don't go out of the ecosystem now?
Yeah, so I think, if you look at the real sort of mind shift that happened only between 14, 15, 16, right? That is where it sort of started coming sort of in a big force back to economy, because of some of the startups who had already been around for 5 years, they started showing results back in global markets, right? Products started getting appreciating. A lot of maturity came into the ecosystem to say, oh, we have quality people too. A lot of sort of appreciation came from rest of the world that there is a talent here. If you go back to the 2000s, we were only known by IT services.
Yeah.
We were not known by the product that we create. Nobody was using, right? I still remember looking at Pallam Nadani's sort of news and happy about it, that yes, somebody's product is right there, in the Washington. So I think if you look at that was the first decade of creating the sort of, I would say, infrastructure. In fact, if that infrastructure in terms of helping people to think about it, helping people to realize about it, even if it's a smaller outcome, but people could see that. And then the second thing happened there is that the social boundaries that we all had, right, was broken apart, right? The families and the parents had no issues at all to say, oh, you want to start up, what is this you are doing? I think that was very, very much in the initial one, right? So that social boundary is broken. We have seen young folks coming out and doing amazing outcomes. So age is not a barrier, because in the world that we lived, it was always treated that, hey, you can only do this after 40 years, after 50 years. I think that also didn't do a good job of what a nation could have done. Right? When you just now talked about the US, young folks have come in and built all those trillion-dollar companies. Here in India, we were not. The country was driven by manufacturing or family houses having certain sort of pedigree, and that got broken over the last sort of decade. Now, everything that we talk about, macro outlook, people outlook, social outlook, the tech capabilities, we are no longer being seen as, oh, they are just copying ideas, right? A lot of good ideas, Dunjo, didn't happen anywhere else. It happened in India. So nobody today could say, oh, you don't guys innovate. UPI didn't happen anywhere else. It happened in India. So I think this was required for the country to come to a level where you're now going to take up a bigger one. I won't be surprised if just now Zoho touched $1 billion. I won't be surprised if we produce $1 billion revenue generating companies equally, not just in terms of valuations, but in terms of impact, because the digital footprint is so high, so large, right? What we were always wondering that India doesn't have a market to sell is a market to sell now. When I say, hey, don't go out of the startup ecosystem, because I think literally startup ecosystem today can offer you everything that you would not get in a corporate, such as a fantastic sort of pay package, no doubt about it. Yes, you would still have some sort of market ups and downs, but that happens everywhere. Jobs going everywhere down. I don't think that's a factor to even look at. Third thing is the global market is interconnected now, right? So you are no longer sitting in Bangalore saying, oh, I don't know what is happening in the rest of the world. You know what's happening in the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is saying, any sort of account to say whether this product has come from India or not India. Indian products are equally welcome. So if you now see every sector that has been opening, manufacturing, so agriculture, or services, or the semiconductor and everything else is coming out, the amount of new ideas that can come back, we never had that opportunity at all. No generation had that opportunity that's going to come in front of us. Even in the healthcare sectors, right? Healthcare sector struggled, right? Today the entire world is saying, oh, Indians are apart. They are different, right? We've taken care of it. So if we take all that factor into account, I don't think any other space, any other country can provide this today, right? And if we go back and talk to a lot of our ex-colleagues and friends who are now living back in London or back in US, I'm sure they would not get this kind of opportunity unless they relocate or join hands with an Indian, sitting in India. This market is wide open. Its outcomes are much larger. We are also creating frameworks that nobody else is creating in the world. Within UPI, within ONDC, we are truly creating digital infrastructures that nobody else is creating. Right? So I am bullish about that. The landlock that we were in, right, in terms of where is the market, is being all answered by opening that infrastructure part, right? And truly we are pioneering in that and saying, okay, here is a new way that to do ONDC. And imagine hundreds and thousands of startups are going to come out of that. Yes, some of them will scale, some of them will have lifestyle, some of them will, but that's going to generate humongous revenues. And this, what we saw on the UPI is going to go back to other countries. I'm sure South African countries or some European countries, some APAC, going to inherit and say, hey, this worked in India, let's just copy the framework, right? And hence we get market access to those countries too. So if you look at what's in terms of the economy outlook to say, hey, India is going to become a $12 trillion or let's say $10 trillion, where is that market is going to come? It's going to come from here. The money is rotating faster than ever had. Right, I think that was one of the factors that didn't, help Indians. Right, Indians were always the money was in bank. Right now, the money is in the digital form. Right, so people have that sort of quick to say, oh, I like it, I'll pay it. Right, imagine getting that 10 rupees to get out of the pocket to one click. I think one click is much easier to do. So we are in a better shape right now. So people should look at for startup than any corporate as such today.
And what do you imagine 2025 or 2030 to be like?
2025, I think we would not just be limiting tech from the product range that we have seen it. Yes, we produced a lot of great CRMs and great sort of tech-enabled software and took that. But I think now software is going to go mainstream to various industries that was always kept as saying, maybe we don't know how to do. So I won't be surprised if we have trillions of offer coming out from the space research. And similarly, agriculture and manufacturing was always a separate sort of thing. Maybe the tech is going to step into that, right? So you will see a much larger demand and acceptance of newer tech products coming out for those industries. So each of those verticals are going to contributing to the growth that we were depending upon rest of the world, right? We were always depending upon the rest of the world to say, where do I sell? I'm not denying that you shouldn't be selling. You should be selling. In fact, you should be thriving in the rest of the world. Build here, sell everywhere, and continue to sell here too, right? Which is what many companies are already doing it. The markets are much like, you have seen how SaaS tools, it's continue to be sold in India versus 10 years back. 10 years back, people were not paying $24 a month. Right, $49. Today, there is no question about it.
Yeah.
Right, people are paying money for that because this is part and parcel of my business. I need it.
Right? This is that business infra. As office, so are my SaaS tools, right? I need office to operate.
Yeah.
So do I need SaaS tools to operate?
And we are seeing the same thing on the Web3. Yes, Web3 has a lot of other angles, but one of the strong elements that's coming out is the entire world is depending upon Indian developers to do something about it, because that large ecosystem doesn't exist anywhere. And today, when I tap into my friends in Valley, San Francisco, I'll tell you, Bangalore is at least 50 times to 75 times ahead in the race in terms of understanding the spec, the frameworks, the other things are happening around the protocols and everything. Right? So we are much ahead in terms of the demand curve of tech skills, and we are opening up the industries where we would require technology as a strong component to build fastest productivities and outcomes and then sell to the rest of the world. So industry verticals, industry segments are opening up where it would be a strong one. Second. Third, overall, if you look at the number of startups that is being started up, it's not, no way it's reducing, whether it's a recession or not, right? So the social framework that I talked about has broken that out, right? So people are not going to be kept to say, hey, this is not interesting anymore, I will not try. That is broken. So I would say by 2025, I won't be surprised if we have multi-billion-dollar revenue-making companies coming from the India as such. India leading in a lot of new tech infrastructure innovations and truly, not in the Web3 world, but truly decentralizing the power that should be there in the Indian economy, right? And ONDC is really one reflection of that. We'll see what happens, and I'm sure it's going to go to iteration, but I'm surely looking forward to similar initiatives where the power is distributed, right? Decentralized into this some extent to say lot many players can get into this space, right, on all sides. And then truly when you have new innovation coming out, the market is wide open, right? It's not going to be controlled by 4-5 top companies as such. And when that happens, you will have a lot more outcome as such. So that's sort of my outlook there.
And I have one interesting point to share, that the last 10 years, right, have changed the entire ecosystem and the landscape for India in tech, right? 10 years ago, we were just a services nation.
Yes.
Today, we are a truly product nation. Investors, global politicians, geographies are looking up to India.
Yes.
So earlier, 10 years ago, everybody ignored India.
Oh,
It's one of the developing countries. Today, we are not one of the developing countries.
Yeah.
We are like the third or the fourth largest in GDP.
Yeah.
Right, and highest in number of the tech talent
Yes.
that we produce, and people are looking up to some of the best tech companies that are coming out of India, whether it be Zoho, whether it be Freshworks, or the consumer apps like Swiggy, Urban Clap, Urban Company, right? Dunzo that you mentioned. These kind of innovations are very India centric.
Very much. And one of the most advantage that is coming out is that because India is using technology now, you are talking about a biggest challenge that's not going to work. I mean, now we're going to talk about performance, right? Now we're going to talk about usability, accessibility, right? Those are the areas that is going to open up, right? The last mile, right? In terms of 100 million people, and the last 100 million people have access or not. In terms of remote cities and villages having, mobile fast access, the demand for newer things is going to come. Right, so a lot of these innovation that we see today, the rest of the world were taking granted. We are much, much ahead, right? In terms of people today living in any other global cities would struggle to get something in 10 minutes. We are now taking granted that yes, something is going to be in my home in 10 minutes, right? Imagine that going to other sort of industries, right? Not just grocery delivery, but other industries that will impact. I'm sure even one segment where it's landlocked is the creator segment, right? India is definitely a land of opportunity for a lot of creators, right? Whether it's content, whether it is intellectual participation and those side of things, I'm sure that's going to open up in a bigger format, right? So those are not touched yet. And we've reached a stage of building a first level of proof and saying, yes, we can deliver, right? And we are truly thinking very original problems to go after.
Though, our income at the grassroots level is not as high as the developed countries. But if we see infra, right, even the grassroots level in villages, people have access to smartphone. People have access to internet. Internet has become like really cheap. It's cheaper than electricity.
Yes.
Communication has become really fast to like even a person sitting in the remotest village can access the best education sitting on their mobile. And third thing is that logistics have built out beautifully in India. So even if I'm sitting in the most northeast or the most southern part of the country, or even in places like Kashmir, those people have access to e-commerce to get the products through the logistical network that India has built. So I think a lot of things have come together.
100%. I think, for a country like India as large, we were just debating about, a gentleman was right here yesterday, VC from US, and we were just debating. I was saying such a large country like India, we could not be doing any other way than what we have done right now. Digital infrastructure is, yes, physical infrastructure required, but a country of that large and big and with sort of, last mile connectivity issues and all that, you cannot address these things without having a digital infrastructure. That for me itself is a great opening of the doors, right? Yes, poor of the poor don't derive as much of benefit as somebody living in first or second tier derives, but at least they are on the same page, right? Today, a vegetable producer or a seller sitting in any part of the India has the first-hand information that they never had in the last any time, right? Now that is the first level of things. Can you integrate them? Can you then build the physical infrastructure such as roads and fastest connectivity and move goods faster? Then we are talking, right? Then the good sort of cycling happens. I always believe India has a lot more money. It's just that it has not come out. It has been locked in many small bits and pieces. Digital infrastructure is first level to unlock it. Physical infrastructure is to bring back and move that across, right? Really move the goods. But digital infrastructure is first to connect them, reach out to them, right? And then do it. And I think, we have seen, I'm sure you would have seen the ITC e-Chowpal long back, right? ITC did a lot of amazing things in the earlier days. right? Very, very early, right? They went a lot of remote places and created those kind of frameworks. I'm sure today with the digital infrastructure, many large scale, even corporations or sort of solution provider can do amazing new ideas. And you rightly, when you said about it, that I can open up a mobile and be there in any part of the city and show my creativity, right? Whatever form it is, right? Whether you're a mathematics teacher or whether it's a yoga teacher, right? You don't have to worry about, hey, where am I? I'm not getting access to the people, right? No thanks to COVID as such with whatever issue happened. But people in remote cities are now teaching how do you do better, sort of yoga, let's say, right? And you can do that. And you can still make tens and thousands of rupees. And that's an amazing thing that's happening just on infrastructure, digital infrastructure.
It's a high time that we'll start seeing it translate to improving the income levels of the remotest people who have yet to see the benefits of the changing in India now.
Yes, definitely. And I think there are a lot of other things would come in, such as insurance for those folks, right? Small sort of bite-sized insurance for folks in the low range folks across India, and some sort of insurance healthcare benefits. Those are again going to rotate big time across India. In what way they can come to mainstream. A better life, a little bit of better life. And I think, with infrastructure always going to be a demand, digital infrastructure is the best way to bring that benefit to them right away.
And Santosh, Web3 is rising. You are part of the Web3 movement. You are incubating Web3 startups with Foundership. Is there some substance to it, or is it because what FTX episode has done, like the FTX bubble blew up very large on the global ecosystem. Yes. It has again brought crypto ecosystem a few steps back. What is there for India in Web3? Yeah,
so I think, Web3 as such is a sort of mix of many things that's happening, right? There are moments of, sort of what can finance be in a global framework, right? Right now, finance is all, again, landlocked in terms of country by country with a lot of sort of barriers, right? So finance is one, where crypto is one of the example. CBDCs are coming out from another side, right? Blockchain is coming out from another side to say, lot of things that has been sort of over the years or over the next 100 years going to be created. It's still going in the age world issue of that, hey, who verified it, who validated it, how much it's truth, right? Again, blockchain can play that out. In terms of people getting denied for access, right? Not just from a country point of view, but country to country point of view. Can there be something decentralized? Not everything, but something. So when we look at Web3, there are so many new ideas coming in, right? So many good new, sort of frameworks being thought through. In fact, the same way, digital infrastructure framework being thought through, they're very unique. In fact, Web3 would not have come earlier. Where we have reached a stage, Web3 makes sense. Yes, but fundamentally, one of the downside of the Web3 is because it's very early, governments have not stepped in, no regulations are there. There is definitely a wild, right? People are sort of, taking bet on things that has no ground, right? It almost sounds like a Ponzi scheme, and it's a Ponzi scheme to a lot extent because there is no strong foundation to say why this crypto coin is 10 rupee or $100. So I think, in my mind, what's happening with the parallels with a lot of CBDCs coming in, maybe at some point of time, some form of that is going to come to Web3. But over the years, if you look at newer way of ideas being generated, right? For example, let's say if you are doing a podcast right now, right there, right? As a creator today, you do not, once you uploaded those podcasts, either they are there in your local servers or they are there by virtue of somebody's platform. And you don't own something, they continue to make money out of that. Can you turn this to an NFT to say, this is its creation? You want to mix and match, right? You can mix and match, and I give you this permission is called NFT, right? That's nothing but the ownership. You can say, hey, you only own that for next 3 years. After that, come and talk to me. Can you do that in the real world today? You cannot. You have to do a lot of contracts. You have to write a lot of pen and paper on a specific country's things. Today, with NFT, you can create smart contracts or some rule engines, right? In a simple way, rule engines to define this kind of micro tokenized form of asset creation, right? That way, Web3 is a fantastic, send, right, by the ecosystem. So, lot of good such ideas are coming out where we are inviting founders in the very early idea stage saying that, hey, if you have a Web3 idea or you're just building it out, as a founder who have built in the ecosystem, I felt that, hey, there is no point for you to go in a wrong direction. Please come to the 3-week incubation camp. You will have coaches helping you to find the right direction, right? Beyond that, if the coaches like you like what we did, you are most welcome to the 6-month acceleration camp where we don't charge you money, but we take a small equity that we distribute among the coaches. Now, with that, we are able to attract 250 startups applied in the last 5 months, and we selected 15 startups in 2 batches. There also, we are asking those strong fundamental questions here, saying, hey, can you make money? Because, which Web3 or Web2 or as next evolutions, fundamentals are right that you cannot build a business just on investors' money. You cannot even build a business on token money. How is it going to be a useful thing that somebody is going to use and say, I'll pay you? Now, you have created some mechanisms to create a smaller economy of around your set of, let's say, community or customers or early believers. Do it. You have DAOs to create an early set of believers to say, Sid and Santosh and Ansi and many other ones are supporting you for the first 100 people. Take it, give them an NFT as a proof, and then go and build it. Tomorrow you can go and raise an equity round. Those newer ideas are very welcome. Right? Today we cannot create a company nowhere by having more than 200 shareholders. Why? We have seen in the world that large-scale communities, in fact, large-scale local communities have been created by tens and thousands of people, right? But in a very trustworthy way. But can you do that in a DAO way? Yes. Is it still a fully proven framework? Not yet. Still getting developed, right? But I would say having some sort of clarity by the governments for the retail users to ensure that they are not participating in somewhere where they are losing money would be a very welcome situation, because that will help building a good confidence among the retail users when they hear a new application coming in, which they should not fear that, hey, this is yet another crypto.
Yes.
Because not everything is a crypto. In fact, tokenized asset is the way to go forward. So I think what happened with FTX is a very, very bad thing in the Web3 ecosystem, because this is definitely going to affect more also millions of people, retails, and which is not at all encouraging, because these are the people who were your early adopters. They were the people who were looking out for a new idea to come where they could utilize it, right? As a blogger, I can do something and see whether I'm getting paid in a token, or my token has some value, or my token has a proof of identity, or my token is a proof of participation. Now, all that fundamentals are going to be questioned here, right? But having said that, we have seen how internet went between 2000 to 2022 now, with many firms came in. What is going to literally work for customers is going to retain. No matter whatever innovation came in the world, they'll all just fade away if the customer doesn't use it, right? So I think we are going back to that clarity way forward, and I hope with India leading G20, we would have a lot more clarity coming out. What is accepted by the country, or what is accepted by a lot of large scale countries? If that clarity comes in, I think there are a lot of good ideas coming in within the Web3 too. And just to add one example, see, Reddit itself has converted the NFT as a collectible, and they are showing that yes, there is a way that you can make, when you say NFT, it's like a little tech thing. It's like, telling, hey, connect to my SSL. Nobody connects to your SSL. They connect to your site, right? Or connect to my HTTPS. So I think if, better solutions are going to come where they make these languages a lot more relatable, such as collectibles or make rather than mint, I would see that this is going to slowly chip into the existing framework without sounding that there is something Web3 here.
No, thank you so much, Santosh, for playing a large part in my life as an entrepreneur. Thank you so much for playing the large part in the life of so many entrepreneurs that you have influenced and guiding in the last 10 years.
Thank you so much.
The ecosystem is, indebted to you.
Thank you so much. I think, that's all the passion was to come in, and as they say, right, each of us are designed in a way, we get driven. So I'm happy to hear that appreciation, and I continue to believe that with Foundership's effort too, there may be hundreds of, folks bloom in terms of, building out their own ideas to the world and make an impactful outcome from that. Thank you.
Thanks.